for Jackson Pollock got his idea for those splatter paintings with somebody looked in his head. There was once a chivalrous order in which there were two schools, one for knights who wanted to ride off and investigate foreign lands, and one for those who wanted to stay home and explore their own city. But both groups were given the common command to stay alert, no matter the surroundings, whether external or internal. With the contemporaneously interested, the distinction between the two has become so blurred as to be near forgotten. One world was dominated not by conscious creatures, but by whirlwinds. But conditions there were such that those who wished could stabilize their center in such a way that something remarkably resembling self-awareness would occur. The speaker had this to say to the assembled: the sign of a man truly ensconced firmly within himself is that the way he feels is more important to him than anything else in life. And someone in the audience asked, is that a positive or a negative? And the speaker shrugged. There was once some beings who believed that within them there were dark, mysterious tunnels. There's this reporter who says he pictures God as being the ultimate rewrite man, but says he can't figure out how he's able to do it in advance. There was once a lighthouse which, once a bulb was installed, believed itself hollow. There's this stockbroker who says that he pictures God as being the supreme investor, but says he can't figure out where he gets his money from. There was once a train with a kind of self-awareness until tracks were laid. There's this general who says he pictures God as being the consummate warrior, but says he can't figure out who he has to fight with. Then there was a man who finally concluded that the past is totally irrelevant unless you can go back to it. There's this psychologist who says that he pictures God as being the master analyst, but says he then can't imagine why he'd waste his talent on man. By metaphor, everything can be explained, one step removed. And only the conscious can take it further and close the gap, arriving at everything as it is. On the way to Istanbul are many delightful sights, but none to match the splendor of the city itself. There's this king who says that he pictures God as being the preeminent ruler, but says he can't understand why one fully in charge would play the role of one in charge. A certain man wanted to start giving public lectures, but life turned him down when it found out that he had in mind such subjects as how to save money, spend less, and like that. He later tried again by asking, well, how about how to lose weight? And life cut him off saying, don't push it. Then there's this intellectual who says that he can't come up with a picture of God. Says he lost his billfold. A fragment found reads, all men feel themselves caught up in some hard to define, yet quite real battle. Likewise is the universe so engaged, and compared to its struggle, consider how puny man's. For the active warrior, the history of man is best forgotten, unless it is recalled in his own blood. Without this genetic link, the past makes no sense and is of no usable significance. There was once a structure that was constantly assaulted by some birds. The structure was metaphors and the birds modifiers. What dynamics are at work that has caused the mind to believe in the existence of an absolute, uncompromising truth, yet attributes conditions to all approaches thereto? The myth of one people says that God on this planet was originally known as the supremely obvious, but that it proved to be too much to handle. Oh, there is a barber who would trim 2 lengthy strands from metaphors. And for the more bold, there's a butcher who will chop and cleave them down to the bone. Feeling that life is operating far outside their control, many men search for external, impersonal conspiracies at work, when what they should be looking at is the inner, personal intrigue that moves the mind to conceive of such notions. There was once a young boy who preferred to go out and face imaginary dragons rather than stay in his room. There was a man who had only one modifier, which he kept securely locked up behind the zipper in his fly, thus presenting a physical example of the tyranny language can impose on other aspects of man and his attempts to escape therefrom. I think. One overlooked history of man tells of him progressing in 3 stages, from having faith in the sun, to having faith in God, to having faith in the mind. And each one still has its supporters who unfailingly insist that any belief in the other 2 represents an impediment to progress. One boy told his mama, "I want to go home." "Shh, shush," she said. "You're not far enough from home yet for that." By coincidence, one man's stupidity ran out at the same time as did his questions about life. Or, if you really want to know the truth about it, his intellectual interest began to dissipate at the same time as his hormonal urgency began its decline. Those who battle against the physical signs of aging are amateurs and dilettantes of the first order. It takes the more conscious to wage war on the only front whereat a meaningful and lasting victory is possible. When he heard of the tune titled, "It Takes a Worried Man to Sing a Worried Song," one guy thought, "Then I don't want to sing a worried song." It is rumored that there are planets in this universe more advanced than Earth, and on which it is not permitted to run ideas in reverse. When one man heard the maxim, "Progress is as progress does," he thought, just what is it that progress does? One guy says he's figured it out kind of like this. The difference between those who publicly preach the man and everyday whiners is that one of them expects a larger audience than the other. The only difference. Declining an invitation to go partake of some public entertainment, one man said, "I can barely tolerate hearing my own self think." If you live in the city, there's noise upstairs and there's noise downstairs. What the hell you want? That's city life. One man noted, "The reason that I gave up alcohol and the like is because I discovered that the intake of external drugs affects my mind in ways I cannot predict." To which someone replied, "Oh, you mean it's opposed to how you can do so with the ones your mind produces for itself." One man mused, "If life is the master of the obvious, then man is the director of the perception of irony. So I guess it works out. But then again, when you're dealing with life, everything works out. Now don't it?" And one boy thought, "It's hard to imagine of anything that man cannot imagine." Tonight's medical news. One man put off an operation until he didn't need it. One man pondered one matter thusly: what good is cat knowledge to a bird? And when he was able to see further pondered: and even what good is bird knowledge to a bird who wants to do more than fly, chirp, and shit on statues? He is certainly on a potentially expansive track, but how to explain to inexperienced water the process of evaporation and rebirth? And that same earlier guy put off yet another operation until he did need that one either. So reflected one man: if I could remember my mother totally, then I could know my grandmother. And if I could remember my grandmother totally, then I could know my great-grandmother. And if I could remember my great-grandmother totally, then I could know my great-great-grandmother, and after that, who knows what. A refinement and combining of several previous tests. The sure way to tell that you are simple and ordinary is if you're not quite sure. Yeah, I know, nobody requested it. The head of one household one day so addressed his brood. The reason man's mind has conjured up ideas of gods, magic, conspiracies, supernatural forces, and creatures from outer space is simple as can be. And please, don't tell me that you still don't know what it is. On one world were marvelous flying machines, and curious to report, the ones which flew highest and in the lead were themselves out of control. The mark of a true warrior is he never ridicules anything that he once took seriously. Chivalry, self-directed. The history of man can be known in the same way that a fish today, did he know the way, could identify traces in the water of a piss taken by another fish 1,000 years ago. Where? Outside the water is anything to go. As he went out to play, a mama mind said to a baby mind, "Now don't forget not to look where you're going." Additional road signs. Those who dream of the Grail and the transcendental search therefore, but who never find the way, are the ones who treat the matter most gravely and speak much of their efforts. At the direction of their teacher that everyone in class should write a thank you letter to life, one boy raised his hand and asked how to spell asshole. Ah, secretly mused the schoolmarm, a mystic perhaps in the making. This thus concludes our joke for the evening, or else latest traffic report. As he was going out into life, one boy's mother cautioned him, "Don't look at the sun," and he exclaimed, Where? And once inside the castle, the warrior noted, "Sure is quiet in here." Even though I did more or less state that last time I was wrapping up the present comments regarding the exaggerated importance the ordinary give to the mind. But I'm going to pick it up a piece of it, plus the end of the example I was using last time to lead into something else. If you recall last time I was using several examples, and the last one was the whole area of financial planning, financial advice, debt management. It goes by many names, but as everyone knows, it's taken quite seriously. There are all over our fair country of Lithuania state government-supported agencies, of which subjects may avail themselves. There are classes that the state will give, and you surely know that there are very non-free classes and seminars to which one may go and spend large sums of money, but all based upon, they describe it, how to manage debt, and that's about as good as any. And if people go spend large sums of money, they put people on retainer. But imagine, and I was using it for an example, debt management. Debt management. And I did the little theatrics last time, if you recall, and asking you rhetorically, could you not conceive of it being not outside the bounds of reason, that you would grab people by their little throats and say, how imbecilic can you be that you'll go take a course, that you'd almost do anything but to go take a course over a weekend or buy books on debt management in absolute defiance of that which could hardly be simpler in a man's life? That is, do you know how much money you make? Yes. Don't spend that much. It is simply a matter of what comes in and what goes out. That was easy enough in a sense, but now to lead it on a slightly higher or more complex path, let me also point out what we didn't pick up at that end of that. It is not the specifics in some example. It is not that people are stupid. That is not it. Because some of the most educated people around, some of the highly educated, I would submit, you would find at such seminars. It is not simply an attractor to those of diminished intelligence. It is quite reasonable, ordinary people. Public television, they run their own shows. And as you know, Wall Street and the whole area of investment and the whole world of finance is considered in all civilizations to be obviously of a higher middle class calling and activity, at least. Because if you don't have much money, it's not. And so it's not just a matter of people being stupid, melodramatics, of grabbing people and say, are you an idiot? Are you a complete idiot? Is this the end of civilization? Is this the end of man's mentation? Are we going to revert back to lizards? Somebody that's smart, someone with the intelligence not to take such a course. It's not that, because what it's getting into is the wider area of my term that I've been throwing about of the exaggerated importance that men attribute to the mind. I'd already mentioned here and there that it is not through some mistake. It is based upon a reality that I threw in from another planet several nights ago, that on one world, the creatures in charge, the creatures in control, the preeminent creatures on a planet, had to pretend to have more power than they do, to hold on to the power that they have. I was assuming that some of you called on that I was speaking of the mind, not creatures from another planet. So it is not a matter that the mind is, the intellectual activity of man is mislaid and misdirected, but it continually must attribute to itself more ability, more power, more success than a man with good eyesight and a man that can shut off the radio for a few minutes and the TV. You figure out whether that's figurative or metaphor or literal, and simply look at it and realize that it continually, at every level, from the top to the bottom in the civilized world, attributes to itself powers, abilities, and successes that it patently does not deserve. To take the financial planning, what I'm trying to get you to see is that it's not the specifics in any example. It is not the specifics that I'm assuming that you see, that debt management, financial sanity is as simple as can be. That's why you keep laughing. That no matter what you say about it, no matter how you preface, or no matter what you've labeled the area, it is a matter of how much comes in and how much goes out. And you can take it down to a level that verbally is not undeserving of my theatrics of grabbing people and saying, well, you idiots. You know how much you make. And what is it? You say now that you need help because you're severely in debt. And you need someone to help explain it. You need to go take a course. Now, you can go on with this forever and make it sound like a cynical attack on people again. But you know, you can ask questions like, well, what is it? Just one day. You haven't been receiving your mail for months. Plus you didn't complain about that, but you have not received any bills from your credit card for the last 6 months. Or when you read them, for some reason suddenly your mind went blank and you couldn't understand the Arabic numerical system. In other words, you can keep dragging it out and make it sound like you knew. The first month you looked and you realized, if we just start wherever it seemed, we just pick out the first of the year. January, you got a bill on your credit card for that month of expenditures, debts of $2,200. Yes, I did. And how much do you make? I make $750 a month. Every month, yeah. That's been my salary for about 2 years now. Okay. And when you saw that, I mean, nothing in you went, you know, that's kind of curious, or maybe things are not, you know, you didn't think anything at all. The fact that that month you spent over twice as much as you made. I mean, you didn't think that that might be any indication of impending debt. Or I mean, it didn't. I know, you know we can keep dragging it out because it is ridiculous at that level, which is the basic level of all debt and financial planning, etc. But that is not the point. That was not why I drug up the examples. Because what you need to get into now is to see it is not the specifics. What it is the inefficacious talk about something, the inefficacious and extremely impertinent talk about something that is indeed a straightforward matter. That is the exaggerated importance, not the specifics. The reason I brought up the financial planning or any of the examples and ones you look at, you miss the point if you look at the specifics and decide on your own or in some agreement with some example I brought up to say, well, yes, you're right. People are idiots to think there's some big deal about staying out of debt or getting out of debt or going to take a course. And the courses sometimes say that one of the purposes is to explain so that you will understand how you got in this position. Which, if anything, just makes it worse from one view, because we just been through that. That somebody's got to explain to you. You're a grown person, you're verbal, you're literate, you can read and write to some degree, yes, but you want somebody to state, to provide a course, or you're going to save your money to take a course, a proprietary course for somebody to describe to you over a 2-day period with notebooks and workbooks, videos, a team of lecturers coming in shifts, ending up with, for the weekend, you know, a 10-hour course, an intensive course, they usually say, an intensive weekend course to explain to you how you got in debt. That is not the point. Here it comes. For the mind to handle and control consciousness, it must continually not look directly at what it's talking about. That's how man stays in his ordinary, his present state of consciousness. Each individual man, humanity in general. But an individual man, to look upon, consider it somewhat metaphorical if you want to, that there is a difference between consciousness and the mind. Or, if you prefer, you can consider ordinary consciousness and then some other state, a potential more conscious condition. Then in either case, the mind, in the first instance I used of saying the mind controls and handles consciousness, or the ordinary state of consciousness holds and controls itself. It doesn't matter. What it means is your ordinary state of awareness, of mental awareness, the way it handles a world in which its role is exaggerated by its own description. The way it handles it is by not looking directly at what it's talking about. That is what financial planning is. It's not the specifics, because I could get, again, it should strike you, would not you agree that any sane person could momentarily get a glimpse of how ludicrous it is for someone to need anyone's advice, much less this whole area of professionals in a 2-day intensive 10-hour course, to describe to them the dynamics of debt. Would you not agree that any sane, ordinary person, just for a moment, especially if I pretend to be maybe a comedian, or I was doing it non-threatening and just an ordinary conversation, people go, yeah, it is kind of silly. And if they didn't get it, you can make them get it right quick. Say, what do you mean? What are they talking about? You want to know the dynamics. Learn the dynamics of debt. And you go, isn't that ridiculous? And I go, what do you mean? You go, got to have somebody pay them to tell you how you go in debt when all you got to do is spend more than you take in? I mean, isn't that silly? You could get any sane person to go, they don't see any particular significance to it, or they can't afford to. So that is not the question. The question becomes this, and it's not just this area, but I'll stay on it for a second. It is civilization itself. It is the complete, structured, mental realm of man. Part of the mind's job, and part of why it must continually attribute to itself abilities and successes that it does not deserve, financial planning, debt management. Let's just call it debt management. Here it is, an area. I'm sure by now that you can get a minor in it in economics, surely. But there are professional fields, men now with good suits and ties and Mercedes, driving around in portfolios and handbags or briefcases or whatever the hell they carry. Important looking men, distinguished looking men, and their field is, with capital letters, debt management. Now, we got that. That is a part of civilization. None of us wish them ill. They need to make a living too. But there it is, debt management. The field. And you do understand it is an intellectually contrived field. And I don't mean contrived in a pejorative sense. It's a result. It is based strictly on the mind. If it was left simply to the body would have no concept of debt management. The body has no concept of debt. Closest thing that the body feels of debt is, I'm hungry. But it does not go in debt. It takes care of that need. That's the closest thing it has to the debt. But it doesn't go in debt. So, debt management is strictly an intellectually based, intellectually supported, intellectually run field. Now, it is not totally invented. It's based on something. People show up and say, yes, I am in debt. I am about to have my wages garnished. I may lose my house. It is a quite real problem to me being in such severe and deep debt. So there is this thing. There is this reality that causes people to seek advice on debt management. So there is some relationship. But those involved with debt management, those teaching it, those who say I need to be so taught, do you understand that here's the debt management and over here is the reality to which it's tied, from which it sprang, that is, being in debt. But to be over here in debt management is an operation of the mind, and the way it handles the situation is by not looking directly at the reality from which it sprang. Yes, I was hoping for more. All right? Let's try it a little more abrasively. Let's just have sort of a timeout, faux, cynical, sneering laugh at debt management. And people, like, ha ha, how ridiculous. How stupid. What? That's got to be worse than religion. That's got to be a more childish, a more spurious human activity. I can't think of anything besides religion that comes close to matching it in its irrelevance, its stupidity, its unbelievable. It's unbelievable attraction. It's unbelievable, the unbelievable reality that it exists. We can go through all that, okay? So let's take that position just for a moment. That's what it's supposed to be. If you can see it from a certain view, what the mind does is always to some degree separate from anything that you can find from which it sprang. Because you can always, men do not simply make up something. If you picked out something else that we might say is not deserving of any serious consideration, fundamentalist religion, political alliances, patriotism in the normal sense, the jingoistic patriotism. We could take in these sorts of ordinary areas, and if you can see it in a certain way, rather than laugh at it and say, well, that's ridiculous. Yes, it's ridiculous. But how would you cure it? That's an unfair question, because then ordinary people would try to answer that. It's not ridiculous because it's exactly what it should be, and you can say, well, it has no real firm foundation. Exactly. But then ordinary people go, well, that's just what I said. What do you mean exactly? You missed it. The way the mind handles its position, the way the mind handles being in the midst of consciousness, being in the midst of a background that I'm calling consciousness, which can be other than it is ordinarily, the mind knows that. Put it to you another way, the mind knows it's stupid. Everybody knows that. That's why people are so touchy about it. We've been through that. If you're at the ordinary level of intelligence, you are extremely touchy about accused of not being so. And if you're not touchy about it, it is a sign that the majority, the ordinary person knows, people know that if you're not touchy about being accused of stupidity and lack of intelligence, if it doesn't bother you at all, it's obvious that you're miswired. You're to some degree a cuckoo case. Everybody knows that, because any sane, ordinary person is quite defensive about their intelligence. The mind has to be. But let me try again with the example. Do you understand? It's not the specifics. It is not the fact, the reason I brought up the example, to laugh and say, well, it's absolute. I don't know a better example of the word ludicrous than debt management seminars or debt management in general, when it takes somebody with a brain that big to know how you go in debt. I mean, how can you not know? How can you ask somebody, can you help me? Some way I ended up in debt. And someone is glad to take your money. Someone is there and says, well, yes, in fact, I'm having a seminar this weekend. Or I'll come to your house for, $50 on the side, and I'll tell you, and I'll counsel with you. I'll advise you. I'll set you on the right track, and I'll bring over some workbooks that you can study later. You end up, I didn't just throw all that in as a cheap shot, you understand. The real seminars, I know damn well they'll drag out several days. And I'm sure they have workbooks, all sorts of things for you to go home with. But do you understand that that is the basis of it? And because we're still left with this, that we walk into this room, one of the nice conference rooms at one of your nicer downtown hotels in one of your nicer cities. And here's a room full of some of your nicer dressed people. They've already been at it half a day on Friday, the first day. And you go in, and on their little tables that they have, there are stacks of books that they got for their money. And their workbooks. And the guy's up there, and he's saying, well, be sure and write this down. And he's got slides up there, and there's all these charts. But they got stacks of stuff. And at the end of the day, they say, no, tomorrow's the last day, and we're going to have to really knuckle down now. We're going to have to push harder because I got a little behind today. So I want you to take home this, and I want you to read some chapter so-and-so, and I want you to study those charts. And all of you got a free video, and I want you to go back and watch that tonight and really work on this and be prepared tomorrow. And the people, they're talking, they're all excited, and they got their little books and their video, and they're going out. And you can stand there and look at that and say, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I mean, it's enough that someone says, could you tell me, how did I get in debt? I mean, that seems dumb enough, right? But then to think they went there, they paid money, they go for 2 days, and they got all this material. It's the mind not looking directly at what it's talking about. It can't. And it's not stupidity on the people's part. Because here it is. I'll try it to you another way. Debt. We all know debt. Debt management. In a sense, the two have no relationship. I had to say they did, but they're two separate things. They always have some little relationship. If there was not such thing as debt, debt management would not have become a field. All right. But debt management is a whole different thing. Truly, once you see it. I know it sounds contradictory for me to say there's connection, but it is in truth. Once one thing is given birth, once debt gave birth to debt management. After that, it's as though it's like a mother who now refuses to admit a child. You know, she just doesn't even recognize it. If anybody asked you, which they wouldn't, but she would deny it. That's not my kid. That's the kind of relationship it is. The point is, debt management, in one quite valid sense, is a farce. It is an illusion. It could be more than spurious. It could be specious. In relationship to debt. That's why I drug it out to extract from you all the cynical and ironic laughter. Because to say debt is one thing. Anybody knows how you go in debt. You spend more than you take in. That's it. There is nothing else to say. Anything beyond that is bullshit, palaver. Yes. So let's don't do that. If that's what you're after, bullshit and palaver, let's forget that. Let's go over here. I'd like to introduce you to the professional area known as debt management. It all makes sense once you realize that you can't compare the two. Because once this debt has given birth to debt management, the relationship is gone. Operationally speaking, there is no connection. Maybe I ran the example on the ground. I could start pulling out politics. Patriotism. Patriotism, when it gets into the sense of the real chauvinistic, jingoistic, fanatical, most people can see that something's a little fishy about it. And yet, especially, I know most minds have trouble finding any humor at the expense of their own religion, their own family, their own intelligence, their own country, their own culture. Yeah. So let's laugh at somebody else. You look at somebody else's patriotism. Country Z looks at country Y across the border. Country Y, they live off tree bark and eating old shoes. They consider marrying your first cousin, playing the field. In other words, they really look down their nose on them. And so to find out that people over in country Y are patriotic, the people in country X, they go, what idiots? They find patriotism on that basis funny. Not their own, but somebody else's. In other words, it's ill-deserved, right? All right. But all patriotism started out from territorial demands. It started out on the same basis that I said that hunger could be a form of debt at the survival level, but now debt management is a mental area, not a survival level. It's a civilized area, an offshoot of man's intellect. So in the same way, patriotism is an offshoot of territorial imperatives. That man at one time walked around, and they will assume, figuratively speaking, that they pissed off an area the same way that deer do. But now, most people, most societies, most civilized company, men try to keep it in their pants. And so now you don't go out and do that. From that arose politics. From that arose nationalism. Actual politics, just a slight variation of that, from politics, that arose simply from throughout the animal world, everywhere. There is dominant, usually males, dominant males, and then the majority of the pack, the flock, whoever it is, if they're running together, the rest of them are submissive. Even zoologists have no trouble nowadays recognizing, and many people have, you don't even have to be a professional, dog breeders can look down at a litter with some experience, and they can just look down at 5 or 6 dogs, and they can spot which one are going to be submissive. Well, they use these terms. They say, well, that's going to be a shy, but they know he's going to be submissive, and here they can spot it immediately. Just 2 or 3 days old, there'll be 1 or 2 out of the litter that just seem to be testosterone on the paw. And they just know it. All right. From that arose politics. From that arose all ideas of, all ideas of politics. But now politics, I could laugh at that as much as I could, or make you laugh as much as that we could financial planning. I don't know why I said that was more. I laughed at financial planning earlier and just sort of said that the closest thing to it would be the folly of religion. Don't know why I left out politics. It gets to be a toss-up. Anyway, at any rate, you must know, and I don't mean using specifics, I don't mean laughing at figures. I could take the whole area of politics and make it look just as ridiculous as I did financial planning. That the whole area that is so sincere, apparently so serious, so meaningful, an area upon which our very lives depend, say those involved. Just the same way that another slight example of the importance that the ordinary place on the mind, which does not deserve, considered nowadays. It's always been thus, but it's now in an exaggerated form, that any intelligent, sophisticated person is assured and accepts the assurance that he is not truly up to date unless he is up to date with the news. That you must keep up with the news. It is very important. I mean, it affects our lives. By God, I'm not going to have to stand here. Surely you're intelligent enough. I don't have to go into some sermon about the importance of the news. You're just not a well-informed, you're not a well-balanced, intelligent person if you do not keep up with the news, which is bullshit. It's almost impossible if you're an ordinary person now to hear me say bullshit, because your mind just goes, that's not true. The important things that happens every day. In fact, things move faster and faster if you don't keep up with the new bills. Hey, how about tax bills pending in Congress and shit like that? Hey, it's going to impact your life, they say. It's very important. I was going to make up a story once. I'll make it up now. Some guys went off on a ship. We're running out of time. Some way they got way away from land. They couldn't get back to land. It said they're going to be gone a long time. There's like 200 guys on this ship. And they got for a while, and there's one radio that they pick up the news, like the BBC world broadcast every day. Half the guys on the board, and we're talking about they're not just your crude knockabout Shanghaied sailors. Let's say it's a cross-section of the middle class of humanity. And they're on board this ship for some reason. They're going to be gone for a year. No contact with anyone. Half of them, for some reason, go in every night and listen to the BBC world broadcast. In other words, they hear the news every day, and half of them, for some reason, decide to hell with it. They go out and they stay out. They see nobody. That's the only thing. That's the only contact they have. They stay out for a year. You like that? 2 years? But a year get most people. Do you know what I'm going to say? They come back to port and they get off. Do you really think? Not think, but can you see what I'm about to say? Are those who kept up with the news every day? They had something to do now. They got in there and they would sit down over coffee after the news was over and they discussed it. They would hear about the changes in the stock market and wars going on over in such and such, and they would sit there and go, my God, what that's going to do to my investments. I had some investments in a construction company that was fixing to go over and start doing some work in Saudi Arabia, and we heard there's another war. Now remember, these other 50, they don't even associate with them. They don't even get it secondhand. The other 50 blithely live out their year in stupidity and ignorance of the news. These 100, the 100 who keep up, they sit around, they make notes, they compare notes, they discuss what the ramifications of the news of the day, right? They get back to port and the 200 stuff off. What is the difference in the lives of the 100 who kept up with the news and the 100 who heard no news for a year? None. I had to go none because the mind just will reject that. In the same way as if I didn't go into some detail and you didn't actually participate, not that I could win you over, people wouldn't see the folly in financial planning. Because just on the surface, I say, I'm going to speak about the folly of financial planning. Any ordinary sane person will meet will think, well, you're an idiot. A man can't live today without financial planning. Right. If he doesn't have it, he'll die, right? Well, I didn't mean literally, but what I mean is he can't live a real full life and, you don't plan for the future. You mean like death? Well, no, you're not. You do hear that any sane, ordinary person, if they heard me start off and say, I'm going to lecture tonight on the folly, the absolute folly of financial planning. Any sane crowd, however I tricked them to the meeting location, they would want to get them leave. Because they would put me down immediately as an idiot. are just absolutely of such a low degree of sophistication. How did I even get here? How did I rent a place and say I'm going to deliver a lecture? In other words, they would completely dismiss it. For me to say, I'm going to speak tonight on the folly, the absolute folly of financial planning. No sane person on this planet would sit and listen to it. Because their mind immediately tells them, as it should, well, you're an idiot to me. You can't live without it. It's a good thing they didn't hear my story. They couldn't anyway, of the 200 guys on ship. I know it's not many of you seem to. Speaking about how the mind will talk about things and not look, just between us, I just can't resist it. I don't want them to hear it because I'm not actually talking about me. But here's a beautiful example. You guys will get it. Today on the news, I just happened to hear that some new Consumer Reports that somebody supposedly impartial did some whole new tests. Beer testers went through all the American brands, the blind test, and the one that came out was Old Milwaukee on top. For those of you who don't know, it's one of the cheapest beers. Well, here it is. And I was out, shopping for the weekend. 30 minutes later, and I stopped, and I know how it tastes, and I almost bought it. I damn near did. I know exactly how it tastes. But here it is. I just heard that a group of experts, people who do it, test it, and it just won. They said hands down, the best tasting beer in America. And I almost bought it knowing better. The kind of stupidity, or what I was calling kind of stupidity. The kind of stupidity is not that people go out and will pay to take for counseling on debt management. It is not stupidity that people will go out and spend their time and effort to elect a political candidate or go out to rallies and spend time and money. And it's not stupidity that causes people to sincerely believe that they must keep up with the news. There are people who will walk out of business meetings. There are people who will walk away from social engagements, as you know. Nowadays, sort of as a colloquial, non-offensive term, they even call themselves news junkies. Those that's just, they might consider when they use that term that it is just part of their social, part of their intellectual life. There are people who say that they're addicted to the news. And as we know, there are more than one or two channels, I think, of nothing but 24-hour news now. That's all it is, constant news reporting. But then there are other people who are quite serious, well off in life, well-established people who say, as I pointed out, we all know it, that it is an imperative that you keep up with the news, that a man cannot live today and succeed. You can barely survive in this competitive, fast-paced world unless, by God, you're on top of things. And it's not true. You cannot be on top of things. It doesn't matter one goddamn bit. I know that's a crude statement, and the mind just goes, well, you're an idiot again. Even when I do it to you people, I think, can anybody hear that? Are they going to finally figure that I am, that wasn't a joke, mad cow disease has complete? But think back to my story of the guys on ship, because your mind just can't do anything with it when you say, well, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference whether you keep up with the news or not. Because I can jump right in and speak for the mind and go, well, that's not true. How about investments? I got a large part of my savings from my retirement in stocks. If I don't keep up with the stock market, how will I know when to sell? And of course, what they mean is, if I see that, that I've lost most of my money in that stock, I want to know that I should have sold it yesterday. So, there's the importance of the news. That was a guy who said that he figured, he was a stockbroker right there in the news tonight, said that he always pictured God as being the ultimate investor, except he couldn't figure where he got his money. See, that's how a fish who know what he's doing can find. You can know the past, because where's it going to go? That a fish, if he knew how to do it today, could find traces. He could know the history of a fish 2,000 years ago who took a piss, something that inconsequential that a fish could know it. So, I've got to keep up with the news. Back to where we were. It is not stupidity for men to take politics seriously. It is not stupidity for them to take financial planning seriously, for religion seriously. Here's the stupidity if you're trying to become more conscious or trying to become conscious. The stupidity is not to see quite clearly that financial planning and whatever gave birth to it, let's say debt, or you can say having finances, whatever you want to call it, there was a reality that started out somewhere at the survival level, the same way as nationalism arose from the defense of territory. I mean, it's obvious. It's no secret. But unless you see that once the survival need gave birth to that which is now part of civilized man, that which is now totally dependent upon intellectual support, there's the connection. But until you see that the second, the civilized intellectual part now bears no operational connection to the former, then you're stupid. Or you're ordinary, but you continue to take stupid things. You continue to take jejune, inefficacious, vacuous, all right, impertinent, meaningless things as being extremely meaningful. And it all fits. Who's to tell you otherwise? Not your own mind, because your own mind would in fact deny everything that I've just said. Anybody, assume that you got a sane, ordinary mind, it will reject everything on the surface. As I said, if it heard that I was going to point out that whatever it was, his lectures on the absolute folly of financial planning, well, that's enough. Or what if I said the meaningless conspiracy that now makes modern man believe that he must keep up with the news? If I said that was the title, those who didn't leave when they heard about it was going to be on the folly of investment planning, this would get the rest of them. They'd think, well, you're crazy. You can't mean that. If I say, oh yes, I mean that. Your mind just absolutely rejects it. There's the stupidity. Not in the specifics. Because then you're as stupid as they are. You're as stupid as what you might be criticizing. And everybody's mind's criticizing something. Somebody else's patriotism, somebody else's nationality, somebody else's religion, somebody else's financial planning. But there you sit in a high-class Denny's, and you fall in conversation with another high-class person there at the coffee counter, and he's reading the high-class stock pages, and he said something about, have you seen what happened to ValueJet stock? God, if I had only sold it 13 days ago. And you sit there and you think to yourself, you idiot. What the hell are you doing in airlines anyway after deregulation, you fool? If men knew how, it's all right to pick on life. But you got to know where to pick. For those of you who didn't get it, one man said that every time he would start to describe life in ways such as this, I'll go ahead and apply it to what I'm doing, that before he would do so, he would always preface what he was about to say by the words, if I may be so bold. If I may, in other words, if I may be so bold as to point out that worrying about any stock, worrying about financial management as a whole, is a fool's game. In other words, whenever he's going to describe something in a slightly unexpected, non-routine manner, he would always say, preface it by saying, if I may be so bold, and one day local condition says, as if I could stop you. It doesn't need to stop you, because if you do it, nobody's going to hear it anyway. As if I could stop you. Would you like another word? That cleared up. It says, if I may be so bold. Then I could say, even life thought to itself, why should I stop you? Go right ahead. Be my guest. Let me try to put a 2-minute rap, but just about God forbid, damn near a repetition of what I pointed out. That it's not the specifics When it comes, remember we're speaking still of the matter of the exaggerated importance that the mind, the exaggerated importance of the mind is assumed by ordinary men. It's not in the specifics, such as people, back to my example, believe that financial planning, keeping up with the news, is important. But remember now, that's an output. It is solely dependent upon the intellect, strictly on intellectual function. So it's taken as important. And I'm saying it's an exaggerated importance. And then I tried to drag it to start off with a kind of level that would solicit a kind of cynical laughter by pointing out, look how ridiculous it is. You can live without the news. Or look how ridiculous it is to study financial or debt management when an idiot, a chimpanzee, almost can understand what debt is. Once you get past the cynical laughter, the exaggerated importance, the whole point, the exaggerated importance is not in the fact that man does these things that bears almost no resemblance to anything meaningful. Or put another way, things that people say are absolutely imperative for a good life, to survive. It is absolutely not true. If you had any sense, you don't need debt management, you don't need to read one book on it, you don't need to vote, you don't need to keep up with the news, you do not need any of it. The stupidity is not in people availing themselves and saying it's important. It's in them not understanding that it's not important. That's the stupidity. After that, hell, go take a course. Once you understand that, hell, go teach a course. Once you understand what the world's about, hell, go teach anything. Just don't be dumb enough to go to school and go spend your own time thinking, well, I need a degree to teach debt management. No, you don't. You need a printer. And rent a place. And of course, to have the intelligence and understanding to call yourself Dr. So-and-so and to announce that you're a graduate of this and that and blah, 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 but that's it. So don't be so stupid and think, well, now I understand how gullible the world is. I'll go teach a course. Well, I'll go study first, of course, debt management so that I can teach it. See, now you're as big a fool as they are. You got to understand that that has no relationship to what consciousness would see. That is the way that the mind holds down consciousness. It keeps consciousness within the confines that life obviously wants. The mind does it to consciousness by never looking directly at what it's talking about. So debt management has some relationship, but the mind is looking at a place as though it's made up of this whole new area. It's concocted this creature made out of other parts. And it's this whole new thing. And the mind knows that what it's talking about, where it came from, is over here. And it thinks I'm talking about debt. And everybody says, yes, we're talking about debt. No, they're not. They're talking about debt management, or whatever they want to call it. Because to talk about debt, you'd look right at it and go, oh, yeah, I know that. Well, what are we going to do now? That won't do. This thing over here now is a thing. And the mind knows that the reality of it's over here somewhere. And so the mind does not look directly at it, because if it did, the whole thing would fall apart. Then they would find it as ridiculous just momentarily, as I made it appear to some of you, or as some of you saw it, that the whole thing is just silly. Other than the fact that civilization is silly, and so you got to stop somewhere.